Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our round 2 live stream for the US Open. Gonna break down what to expect for conditions tomorrow, how to approach DFS and the prop side of things, and go out there and crush your Friday exposure. Hopefully Thursday was a kind one to you. In terms of my DFS lineups, off to a pretty solid start. And over there on the prop side, was able to make it a profitable day, both on Underdog and Prize Picks, which always works for that side. So hopefully it was equally as strong for you guys, and you're ready to hop back on the wagon and get after it for the round 2 action. We've got a lot of you down there in chat. YDG says, thank you for pointing out Cantlay out there yesterday. Of course, and you finished 2nd and 6th out there in the round 1 showdown. That's a pretty sweet finish, if you ask me. So good stuff, man. Let's run it back. We got Aaron down there, Matt with some questions. If we have any questions, we'll touch on them in just a little bit. We got Orangutan, Matt down there, Trump down there too. Interesting name, but love the veterans out there, obviously. But welcome to the live stream. Hopefully you guys are having a solid Thursday night and are ready to get after it. But before we hop into all the action, I want to remind you guys of the sponsor of this live stream. For all of your DFS needs, not just over here on the golf side, make sure to check out the Ship It Nation. They're a perfect partner for the channel because I know a lot of DFS enthusiasts, just like myself, don't like just playing DFS for one sport. They like going out there playing it for basketball, maybe sports they aren't as familiar with something like MMA, whatever the case may be. You might be a baseball fan, might be a college football fan, NFL when that comes around. Ship It Nation covers all of those different sports. So that's the beauty of having that kind of a fantasy site, is having the variety out there with your sports. So if you're somebody that wants to dabble on a sport for just a week or two, wants to kind of interchange what you're going with day to day, it's a perfect site to go after, and they have the best content out there for pretty much every sport in existence that I can think of. They're at the top. They have a lot of your actual winners out there in GPPs. It's not just about plays, projections. They also have a lot of resources that teach you your own process. So make sure to check it out. They are a proud partner of the channel over here. And of course, the code Luke10 will give you guys a discount off of any membership. And they're great guys over there. Again, I wouldn't partner with a site that I didn't trust, and they're absolutely fantastic over there. But let's hop in right into the content. So over here on Data Golf, we can take a look at the AM versus PM average. That's usually where we start on these live streams. And I know we had a question about it. So here's your answer, by the way. I think it was Matt that was asking about that. The morning played about a half a stroke easier than the PM. And it was all said and done, it was about 0.55 shots. And then out there for Friday, let's just go ahead and hop right into the forecast, I guess. You'll see out here on Friday, it's really warm in the afternoon. You've got like 90 to 95 degree temperatures. And what I think caused that 0.5 shot difference today was the greens firming up. It got a little bit harder to hold greens in regulation. It was harder to get close to some of those front pin locations. And while the dynamic might be a little bit different tomorrow, I'm expecting them to make at least one hole drivable in terms of the shorter par fours. I still think scoring is going to be hard to come by. And by the time we get to the afternoon and we have this 90-degree weather, sun for pretty much all day, I think that those PM guys are going to be playing on rock hard greens. If it's going to be hard to hit the greens, we know how difficult the around the green shots are. That's where you're really going to find that penalty. So for round 1, it wasn't really a scorcher out there. We didn't have 90-degree temperatures, and it already led to over a 0.55 shot advantage. Imagine out there if we truly get those greens baking out. So I see some kind of an advantage, both for showdown, props, whatever you name it, to targeting the early players. The PM guys, it's not like they're not going to get there. Like, for example, right, the PM played harder today, but Rory still shot -5. Bryson still shot -3. Terrell Hatton still shot -2. Akshay also got to that 68 as well. You had plenty of AM guys up there, but PM guys mixing into the mix as well. So I don't think that you want to only target AM guys, especially if you're going with a super big player pool. But if you're keeping it a little bit more constricted, and my exposure for round 2 showdown is probably going to be like 30, 40 lineups, I don't have as large of a player pool. And as such, I mean, you'll hear my take on DFS here in a second. I'm really considering this weather because I think it might be over that 0.55 shot advantage. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. It's also worth noting that a lot of your PM wave had stud players. You had your world number 1 through 3 in that PM wave, and it still played 0.55 shots harder. I think that the PM guys in general were higher caliber players than what you had over there in the AM wave. So if they get the better side of the draw and they're the stronger wave out of the two, the difference might even be bigger, right? Just because of the talent gap difference between the AM and the PM wave. So that's it for the weather. We're going to circle back on that when we talk about props a little bit later. But as you'll see with my DFS player poll, guys, you got to try and find a way to generate an edge out here in Showdown. And what I'm doing out here for Friday is taking all AM players. I'm still trying to mix in a little bit of game theory, ownership pivots to get some differentiation and leverage to the field. But in terms of where I'm going to try and actually like build my player pool around and really find an edge over the rest of the competition is just based on weather. Obviously, I'm going to try and focus on players that somewhat kept it together out there on Thursday, also that have birdie or better upside. But the most important thing out there is that first off, they're playing in the morning for me. And second off, that from the ownership perspective, they fit whatever build I'm going with. If they're a chalky guy like Scottie Scheffler, who I'm taking at about 23%, it's totally fine as long as he's one of the maybe one or only two guys in my lineup that I'd consider quote unquote chalky. If the other 3 or 4 spots are going to be pivots, we're totally fine with that kind of build. So we'll talk about lineup construction a little bit later when we actually build a few lineups together. But what we're going to focus on here are the pieces that I'm building around. You'll see that really the only quote unquote chalky guys that I'm using would be a Scottie Scheffler, who's not even the highest owned guy up top, a Hideki, who's also actually lower owned than some of the other guys around him, and then Max Homa, the same thing, about 13.5%. These are about the highest owned players that you're going to see me talk about here in this live stream, and they're all lower owned than the guys around them, right? They're not the mega chalky players out here for round 2 Showdown. So in general, I'm taking the AMT times, but also in general, I'm taking a lot of low-owned plays. I'm trying to take a stance against the field when it comes to ownership, because with a weather edge, also with some good old game theory and leverage in lineups, that's how you go out there and really have yourself a showdown slate. So it's a proven concept. It's a proven strategy over the last 2 years in DFS. People have gotten a little bit sharper about trying to take that weather edge, trying to lean into the stats that we see from round to round. So I do expect the AM wave to be a little bit higher owned, but it hasn't gone to the point quite yet. Maybe it never will. Honestly, we've been waiting for it to happen over the last year or so. People have gone slightly sharper and sharper, but still a vast majority of the field, 50-60% of lineups fail to build without any semblance of correlation. I'm talking stacking one wave or the other. I'm talking stacking just like all the top of the leaderboard out there in Sunday Showdown. Players just refuse to do correlation. I think it's the more casuals that refuse to do it. So take advantage of that, right? Know that the field, a vast majority of them, especially in like your big lottery contests, aren't going to be building the way that you are. So let's talk about Scottie Scheffler. Had a sketchy round today, which I honestly didn't foresee coming. But every time this guy has had a sketchy day, he's almost always backed it up with something like 3-4 under. And we know that there are rounds up to 5 under par out there. I do think conditions might get a little bit tougher out there for round 2, but it wouldn't surprise me for Scottie to go out there and shoot a 65. So the fact that he's going to be lower owned than Rory, he's only marginally higher owned than Xander Schauffele now. Even guys like Bryson, Aberg, I have like within 2-3% ownership of Scottie Scheffler. The world number one, the clear best player in the field, should be, in my opinion, at least 30 to 40% owned. Now, in your higher dollar single entries and single entries in general, I think that Scottie Scheffler is probably going to be closer to 35, maybe even 40% ownership. But in the big field lotteries, I think enough casuals are going to want to jam in Rory because of his -5 rounds. I think enough casuals are going to see Bryson at -3, right? Everyone loves Bryson, especially all the YouTube casuals that don't even play DFS golf, right? They just want to take their boy Bryson in the lineup. Somebody like Aberg down here at $9,600. That's shot -4. These kind of players are going to take ownership away from Scottie Scheffler. So Scottie's +1 performance was far from the end of the world, where he was still 2 shots better than the field average for round 1. He is squarely within the cut line at this stage. And for whatever reason, I'm expecting the ownership to reflect that people are jumping overboard. So give me some Scottie Scheffler. He's still owned, so it's not like you can completely ignore this ownership number, but in comparison to some of the other guys around him, like Rory, he's actually the lower owned of the bunch. Down into this 9K range, I'm taking Hideki for a bounce back. He was obviously one of my stands this week that I took at slightly higher ownership. And what I like about Hideki is he was using the flat stick quite efficiently. The ball striking was subpar. It's why he didn't go out there and post a solid round, because typically when Hideki has that flat stick, he goes out there and shoots someone like 4 or 5 under. The ball striking is just so reliable that, we're waiting on those spike putting performances. So a little bit disappointing that he wasted that out there today. He went out there, was more than productive enough with the putter, but out there for round 2 showdown, I do like that momentum that he showed. And at +2, he's not going to get a bunch of steam. He was closer to 20% out there in main slate. And now that he had that slightly shaky round, we'll put in quotes, again, still a shot better than the field average, I've got him at about 10.8% projected ownership, which is much more reasonable than what he was for main slate. So if you were somebody that faded Hideki out there for your main slate lineups, I didn't do that, right? I played him out here this week. If you did fade him, though, it'd be a really good spot to hedge your exposure. If you're somebody that's hoping that he misses the cut, well, if you play him in a few lineups, he ends up failing, well, at least you have, that fade out there in the main slate. Whereas if he goes out there and capitalizes on that hot putter, as I think he's very likely to do, then you could get a low-owned player that could pop off. I also like Max Homa at $8,500. A lot of it's the price tag. He's just way too cheap for the kind of talent level. And the putter today was really good for the par putts. He had a lot in that 6 to 12 foot range. And I believe he made all but one of them out there on his round, all but the one on the last hole, believe it or not. So I don't love that momentum, right? Missed that par putt out there on his last hole, hole number 9. But I do like the putting. So kind of like Hideki, normally I'm looking for ball strikers to go ahead and turn it around, but these are elite tier players. We're not talking about some slappy where we're hoping they can go out there and continue the ball striking. We're talking about Max Homa, Hideki Matsuyama, who I don't know if we want to hold one bad round against them. And once again, both of them still shot better than the average. Max Homa, 2 shots better than the average. And then obviously Hideki, that 1 shot better than the 73. So these sort of players, I think, are going to be artificially lower owned because your casual golf fan is going to hold it against them too much. They don't realize how difficult it is to go out there and score, and would much rather play Cantlay at -5, would much rather play a Tony Finau at -2, and those are going to be your chalky players down there in the 8Ks. Up top, right, I mentioned some of the chalky guys already, so it's not like you have to avoid a Rory, a Bryson, and Aberg that are getting some ownership, but you should just be careful about taking those kinds of players, especially if you plan on taking more than one of them. If you're going to start with one of the guys that's 20% plus up top and take a Tony Finau, a Cantlay as your second man in, well, that's where you're starting to get into a chalky build, where you're starting to have to really worry about your ownership for your last 4 spots. If you started with one of those top 4 guys that are getting attention and then went with Cantlay as your second man in, your last 4 spots, in my opinion, all have to be sub 7% owned. They'd all have to be pivots to go out there and round out your lineup, which is doable. You can certainly build lineups like that. However, it's not my favorite kind to build. I'd rather have a little bit more flexibility with the rest of my spots, which is why I'm avoiding and not playing players like a Cantlay or Tony Finau for tomorrow. They're also PM wave players, so I think it helps with fading them. If you're somebody like myself that sees a slight advantage to the AMT times, then maybe you do avoid them, and it makes it easier to do so. Going down to the 7K range, I guess towards the top end of the 7s, Terrell Hatton getting some exposure at $8,000. Russell Henley also about 15% owned himself. Outside of that, though, maybe Corey Connors at about 14-15%, a little bit chalky there too. No one else is really getting that much steam. Guys like Norn are much lower owned than what they were for main slate. No one's playing DJ. No one's taking guys like J-Day out there after his +1 round. So if there are some AM guys here that you want to take at low ownership, have at it, right? Guys like Cam Young, I think, are perfectly in play. J-Day, maybe not my favorite option, but he is an AMT time. Alex Noren was excellent on approach today, but just could not buy a putt. Very atypical for the Swede. So perhaps you look for a little bit of bounce back there with the flat stick. But there are plenty of options here that just aren't getting ownership. Christian Bezainhout, you could say the same thing about. He was relatively chalky out there for main slate, and now I've got Christian at sub 7% ownership. So there are a lot of options to get different down here, and really the only thing you have to do out there, in my opinion, out there in your lineups is be careful. I'm not saying avoid it. I'm not saying you can't play some of the chalkier guys, like I mentioned, like a Corey Connors, for example, et cetera, et cetera. Just if you're playing them, be careful about the guys that you were taking up top. If you started with a Scotty second man in, maybe a Patrick Cantlay as your second man in, using somebody in this range that's chalk as your 3rd, 4th spot is probably not a good idea. At that stage, you're going to have a hard time getting different with your last 3 spots. And it's not the kind of lineup that I think you should want to be putting, at least in the big field GPPs. Single entries, you could talk about it. You might be able to make it work with your last 3 spots. But if you're playing in one of the big lotteries, big $5, big $15, $20, whatever the case may be, out there for round 2 showdown, That's something that I would avoid personally. Bottom end of the sevens, Jordan Spieth at 7,500. If you're looking for a player that was gaining on approach, could not do it with the flat stick, very similar to an Alex Noren, that's exactly what Jordan Spieth did. 3 tee to green categories, was a solid positive in all 3, yet lost over 2 strokes with the putter, which, you know, in 2024, if there's one category that he's been okay with, it's been the off the tee play has been very accurate, and the putter. He's been usually gaining with the putter, most fields out there on tour. So for him to lose over 2 strokes in a US Open field before the cut with all the amateurs out there is a little bit of embarrassing out there for Jordan. So he's only 7,500. He's got the AMT time. He's also got next to no ownership at 3.9%. I'm a Jordan stan. I'll always find reasons to play the guy, but from an objective standpoint, from a tout standpoint out here, it's not me, you know, the fandom in me telling you to play Jordan Spieth. It's the shots gained metrics. Like from tee to green, you'd be hard pressed to find a better player in the field. If you can go out there and even just putt to a neutral out there tomorrow, it's something under par. And with that morning tee time, maybe it is 1-2 under par that he ends up shooting. Keegan Bradley would be the next play I want to point out here. So Keegan Bradley at $7,300 really didn't do anything well today, yet he's still only shot +4. And I say only shot +4 because plenty of players shot +8 to +10 today. And legit PGA Tour players, right? There were plenty of amateurs that blew up, but you had legit PGA Tour players that just could not bother to go out there and score. Keegan Bradley's a grinder. He's always going to keep his head on his shoulders, and literally without his off the tee game was a little bit off. His approach play was horrible today. His chips were off. He was hitting everything to like 10 to 15 feet. He somehow kept it together and shot a +4 score. So I think a lot of people are going to hold that against him. That's why I only have him at about 5.7% projected ownership. But he's a grinder, and I'm not going to hold an 18-hole sample against a player. So if you're going to give me a low-owned Keegan Bradley in that morning wave, that's the kind of player that I'll look for a bounce back on. Down here in the lower end of the sevens, so $7,000 flat, we've got Mackenzie Hughes, a +2 score, which was marginally better than the field average, a stroke better than the 73 scoring average, but he's only 2.2% owned. So no one's getting there because of the non-sexy scorer. And at the same time, I think really fits this course. Is a good putter, solid short game player, and of late has been a lot more consistent with the ball striking. The off the tee play has gone better as he's gone longer over the last few years, has been a little bit more accurate lately, which has also helped his case. But the approach play, well, it hasn't been a strength. And frankly, if you look at his stats, he's still negative over like the last 24 rounds. It's been less negative than what we're used to seeing. So Mackenzie Hughes, low-owned flyer down here in the 7K range, isn't necessarily a guy that I think you have to go out there and play yourself. But these sort of players that are essentially unowned at the bottom end of the sevens, that have birdie or better upside, that have shown form lately, in my opinion, those are perfect spots to get to. The key things to look for here, I would say skill set throughout the window. I don't even want to bother with that all that much. Are they low owned, and are they a player that has form coming in? If they can check both of those boxes, there's a good chance that I'm playing them out there in the morning wave. The last player we'll talk up here is going to be Chris Kirk at $6,700. So he's a little bit cheaper. And in fact, one of the cheapest options that I'm taking in my player pool. Morning tee time, only about 3.1% projected ownership. And what I like about Kirky is, once again, he kept it together. It's not like he had a horrible day, still 2 shots better than the scoring average. But because it's not an even -1, -2 round, I've got him at just 3% ownership. And we know long-term that Chris Kirk is at least one of the top 40 players in this field. He has the win in the signature event this year, has in general been a lot more consistent in 2024. And while his form isn't fantastic, I do see the upside in somebody like a Chris Kirk. So I think that if there's a US Open where a player like Kirk could finish top 25, it's here without a bunch of rough, without a bunch of 5-6 inch rough. It's why I liked playing like a Siwoo Kim this week. I would never play a Siwoo Kim, a Chris Kirk at a typical US Open, even PGA Championship setup, I would probably avoid those short plotter kind of players. But this week, with the rollout you're getting in the fairways, I think they're live. And from the Showdown perspective, are going to be some of your lower owned options. So that's it in terms of the player pool. We're going to catch up on any questions that you have now. So if there's any players you want to deep dive on, go ahead, let me know down in chat, and we'll go through the questions that are already down there. So first off, welcome. If you guys are just joining us, we are going to talk props here soon. We'll be doing that probably here in about 5-10 minutes. But for the next 5-10 minutes, let's talk some DFS. So let's go ahead and answer all your questions. So Aaron asks, first off, welcome, Aaron. You've seen some DFS players roll out lineups in a single entry 3 max, so smaller exposure contest with exclusively chalky guys, or sometimes having one pivot with like a 6 to 12 percenter. Any take on that? Well, I would say that's not my favorite strategy. I'm usually a lot more contrarian about it. I understand the thought process, though. I would say that strategy would be the most common for Sunday Showdown. Around 2-3 Showdown, I would say that's probably a little bit more rare. So I guess go ahead and clarify if that is just a Sunday Showdown trend that you've noticed. But I'm usually against that kind of thing. I'm a lot more contrarian. And personally, my exposure for DFS is a lot more GPP based than it is for single entries. So I don't know. I guess my take on it is that I wouldn't play that way very often, but a majority of my lineups aren't even built that way. They're built for the lotteries. So I don't think about it as often as maybe some of the top players do. And you said, love the content. Keep it up. Absolutely, boss. Appreciate you, my man. The difference between morning and PM. So I showed it before, but it was about half a stroke, 0.55 strokes difference between the two waves. I do think it'll bake out, like you said there, though. Hopefully, give you a good idea there of some of the guys that I like there. So go out there, have yourself a Friday slate. What's going on, Bart? Thank you for answering your question about stuff yesterday on Excel. Of course, Bart, I know it could be a little bit tricky, right? Using a program that you're not familiar with. So I got you. If you have any other questions, just let me know. I'm always willing to go over that for you. Guess you can't call him can't play anymore. That is right. Until he goes out there and shoots +4 tomorrow, then you can absolutely call him can't play. Deacon says, ready for some round 2 magic. I'm with it. And smash the like button, he says. You heard the guy. Go out there, smash the like button like Deacon said. I'd appreciate it. Go out there, get this content out there to even more people, and would help the boy grow the channel out here. So I appreciate you guys for stopping by, and appreciate you, Deacon. What's going on, Phil? You got a Millie Maker with McElroy, Cantlay, Fitz, Spieth, Woods, and Hostler. That's kind of crazy. You got Woods in there. That was a wild take. The Spieth take, I guess he's not playing horribly. He's still within the cut line now. You need some magic from Tiger, that's for sure, right? As always, Brooksy flying under the radar. Like you said, don't talk about it too loudly, right? Yeah, I like that he's around even par. If he would have finished it -3, like he was at one stage, he wouldn't be as much under the radar, that's for sure. You don't know if that heat will be good for Tiger. I've heard the opposite, actually. So he's from South Florida. Obviously, down here, it's even warmer than what they're going to have in Pinehurst. A lot of his practice rounds have been in the afternoon. So I wouldn't worry about that, Steven. If anything, I would rather it be really hot for Tiger than be cooler like we saw for some of the other majors, as that's when you get stiff. When you're somebody that has had as many surgeries as Tiger Woods has had, you don't want to have cooler weather. In fact, the warmer temperatures are what you're looking for. So I wouldn't worry about that. He's a Florida guy. He's used to it. Good points on the differences of scores. Absolutely. Yeah, I think the PM guys were better too, like you're saying. Any thoughts on the cut? So I think it'll be 4-5 over par. I'm going to shade towards 5 over because I think conditions might be a little bit harder. Does anyone else feel like English is the nuts tomorrow? I didn't have that same inkling, Rami, but maybe he will be. He's capable of it. I think he's a decent play for tomorrow. That's for damn sure. I don't know if I thought he was going to be the nuts, though. Dream scenario. Imagine Tiger versus Scotty in a playoff. That would be crazy. It's a little bit of dreamland, though. I did bet Tiger this week. I told you guys yesterday, right? I bet Tiger Woods. It's looking like a donation. Like I said it was going to be. Todd says, what do I like on the outright board? We could take a look at that a little bit later, but I haven't checked since the beginning of the tournament. So we'll have to circle back on that after we get through props. Any hope for Keegan on a bounce back? Yeah, he's only one shot worse than the field average. So I talked him up there just a little bit ago. So for sure, think he's capable of it. And if they're only like one shot worse than the field average, they're easily within the cut line. They shoot even par, even +1 tomorrow. They're likely into the weekend. Do I feel any different about where I would rank around the green? Nope. I think it's the most important stat. That, perhaps putting, I think off the tee play is actually low-key important this week too. The approach play, in my opinion, is diminished. I mentioned that out there on the live stream, and I'm still sticking with that, especially after round 1, and it's only going to get harder, right? It's only going to get even more so the case as these greens get more fiery. Thoughts on Sargent as a last man in? Okay, Max. I don't know if you know that I was playing him for tomorrow, but I am playing him, Max. And let's just keep that between me and you, right? Because I'm hoping that he's going to be sub 1% owned. But yeah, I do like him and I'm playing him. I don't know if you saw the spreadsheet or anything, and that's why you asked about it. But yeah, I am playing him. And I think he's a decent last man in, especially like for a lottery contest. That's where I'm playing him. I wouldn't use him as like a single entry, higher dollar kind of contest, but large field lottery, 100%. Rank Shoffley, Bryson, Scotty, Fleetwood, and Rory. I'm gonna say check out the Patreon on that, William. That'd be essentially ranking the entire top tier, and I don't want to give away all my plays, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you to check out the Patreon if you want all of those, because it's a little bit too specific of a question. Sorry about that. Is there a 4-2 more viable than the 5-1? No, I think you should be playing AM guys. T Smoney says, can we talk about the Luxac, Kawa, and Cantlay today? Yeah, if you shoot -4, -5 around this course, you Luxacked it. Even Rory, you shot -5. If you don't make a bogey out there like Rory did, you got lucky with the greens. There are spots where you'd automatically make bogey around Pinehurst. And if you happen to not make a bogey, it means you didn't get into one of those spots. So yeah, it's crazy, dude. It's going to be that kind of week. That's why I think the winner could be someone random. Now, it's a major. You're still probably going to get an elite tier guy that wins. But I do think it's possible that you got like a mid-tier winner here just because there's so much randomness. Whether it's the greens or even the Wiregrass rough. I mean, there were so many guys that were just missing fairways today and just got away with it. Bryson comes to mind as a player that was spraying it, and every time he missed a fairway, he magically had a perfect lie out there. I'm sounding a little bit. I love Bryson, by the way, so I shouldn't sound that tilted about it. I say that because I faded him for a prop today that he didn't hit. So that's why I'm a little bit salty about it, but is what it is. Yeah, and like you said, those other guys also kind of tilted me a little bit today. Is the cut line +2? +2, but almost +3. It is creeping towards +3. It's only like a few spots off. What was JT's downfall? I honestly don't know. It looked like everything. He lost in almost every shots gained category, and that's just going to happen at courses like this. A brutally difficult US Open venue. If you don't have your best stuff, you're going to shoot like +7, +8. And plenty of guys did today, that's for sure. What do I think? What day do I think the course will play the hardest? Sunday, for sure. It's going to get harder almost every day, I'd imagine. Now, the difference is setup. We're going to talk about that, Jason, but they're going to move up some tee boxes, whether it's tee boxes on par threes. They're probably going to move up a few of those every single day. And then there's a few drivable par fours that aren't really drivable as the current setup. But if they move up the tee box, they can be drivable. I actually think there's 3 holes that they can do that on. Back in 2014, they moved up. There was each of those holes, they did it on one day. So day 2 is when they started with it. They moved up hole number 3, I believe, was the hole that was the first one that was moved. And then the other 2 in the back 9 were moved on Saturday, Sunday. So the scoring average might actually get easier for like one of the days, but the actual green conditions, the firmness of the greens, all of that will get harder as the week goes on. Like undoubtedly every single day, it's going to get harder and harder on the greens. The X factor is where they put the tees and stuff, because in theory, they could do whatever the hell they want to, right? Did Svenny lose a lot of strokes with the putter? Let me double check for you. I don't know off the top of my head, but if you're saying that you saw him missing a lot, there's probably a good chance, but I'll give you the definitive take. So let me find him on here. I know he didn't have the greatest round, right? He shot like +3 or something like that. So he actually gained strokes with the putter. So not so much, Max. The main issue for him looked to be the around the green. And honestly, his +3 round was about field average. So I don't know if he had the worst round. And you saying you're playing him? I think it's totally fine. Can Bryson show up again? I think so. I don't know if I'd take him under 71.5, but I think he's capable of showing up for sure. Wouldn't Cantlay be considered mid-tier with how crappy he's been? I mean, he has a 3rd place at the RBC Heritage. I think people give these players a little bit too much shit, right? I wouldn't call him mid-tier. If you want to give him shit because he's can't play, he's the most punchable guy on tour, then have at it. I'm cool with that. You checked Hovland, left 6 putts about a foot short. Yeah, he was off too. So JT was off, shot like +7. Hovland showed a little bit more life, especially towards the end of his round, but he looked absolutely broken. Now, JT, I believe, is the PMT time. I would not touch him in Showdown. Hovland has a much better chance. In fact, I don't want to give too much away, but I think he's a very, very intriguing option out there for your round 2 Showdown lineups, because he at least showed something, right? Seth looks like good chalk so far. Yeah, good chalk for 18 holes. He's got to do it for 54 holes more. So we'll see, William, right? He's done it for 25% of the golf tournament. And he's what, like tied for 17th? That's not optimal. He hasn't done anything with the birdies either. So I don't know if he's good chalk, if he's not even close to the optimal lineups. Seth does Hovland have a chance to play the weekend? Yes. If he shoots -3 tomorrow, he likely makes the weekend. And we saw guys shooting -3, -4, -5. So it's possible. Is it asking a lot? For sure, especially at this kind of golf course. JT got the +4, +5. Then he started going directly at hole locations. Yeah, I noticed that too. And when you're playing shitty golf like that, you have nothing to lose. That's why Hovland at the end, I think, started posting decent scores, is because he took aim at pins and was executing. So it's I don't know, it's a tilting golf course. You can go on full tilt real quick. And when you do, that's why you shoot like +7, +8, because you stop caring. I mean, you're like, what the fuck? I'm +7 at this point. Why not take on this pin location? And then you end up making another double, and it just spirals out of control. Who would have locked in cash lineups? Scotty Scheffler. What do I think about Fox? I'm not sure when he's teeing off. Actually, if memory serves me correctly, right, he's a PM. So I would avoid him for Showdown. I like him in general. Quality player. McIlroy and Bryson playing morning tee times? They are, yes. Did anyone I watched have a round where I thought, man, if he cleans up one part, he might really go low? Yeah, Jordan Spieth did. Alex Noren had that same kind of round. For Jordan Spieth and Alex Noren, it's the putter for both players. Let's see. Hideki Matsuyama, the iron play. If he can hit his normal, really solid iron shots, I think he'd have himself a really good round. And then Scotty Scheffler, too. If Scotty Scheffler cleans up the off the tee play, he goes back to the Scotty that we love. Yeah, he did birdie his last hole. Good shit. I forgot about that, but you're right, too. So that's some good momentum. Off the top of your head, do I think anyone will break 65? No, I don't. 65 posted today will likely be the lowest score of the week. If it gets broken, it's a 64. I can't see anything past a 64 being posted. And at this stage, that's likely the lowest score that we get. All right, let's build one lineup together real quickly, and then let's talk through some props. I got to get out of here around 9:45. So we gotta keep this moving here. So if you have any last second questions for DFS, let me know down in the live chat. And also, if you haven't already smashed that like button, first off, what are you waiting for? But go ahead and do so out here for your boy. But let's talk through this lineup construction. So when I'm building out here for my round 2 lineups, because I'm already factoring in lower owned plays, right? I'm avoiding a lot of the chalk on purpose, even before I go out there and build lineups. My lineup building process is pretty simple, but for the sake of making this a little bit more applicable, right? Maybe to show you what you'd worry about if you're taking more chalk, let me show you how you'd be building some lineups. So a little bit before I told you guys that Rory would be your highest owned player, or is likely to be your highest owned player out there in round 2 Showdown. For your second man in, this is where you have to do some thinking. Guys like Cantlay, they're going to be like 20% owned. Even somebody like a Tony Finau, I've got at 15, 16% ownership. If you're using them as your second man in, that's where it gets a little bit dicey, like I was mentioning. So if we go ahead and plug in Cantlay at $8,700, your last 4 spots, at least if this is for your big lottery contest, I would want sub 10% in all 4 spots. I would not want anyone else that I'd quote unquote call chalk, which kind of handicaps you. Especially if you wanted to take somebody that was more popular, like a Corey Connors, for example. If you wanted to take a Russell Henley, a Terrell Hatton out here in this kind of build, you'd have a really hard time doing so because you've already started with 2 popular players. So if any of those names sound like somebody that you want to play for your round 2 Showdown lineups, I'm fading all of them. Every single person I just named, I'm not playing, by the way, just for full transparency. I'm a madman when it comes to playing contrarian. I do not care about playing guys that are gross plays. But if you're not as willing to take on lower owned players, maybe you want to take some of the guys like Corey Connors, even a Straka right at even par. Well, then don't take a Cantlay as your second man in. I still think you should be taking a guy up top that you feel comfortable with, whether that's Scotty, Xander, Rory, Bryson, you name it. Anyone up top I think is in play. That's an AM wave player. Your second man in, though, is I think where, at least in my opinion, you should be going to a pivot. So I think a better option would be a Fleetwood. He's AM and slightly lower owned. You could go down a little bit further, maybe even take a Hovland at 9,400. He'd be the mega pivot as your second man in. If you took a Hovland as your second man in, you could afford to take somebody like Terrell Hatton at chalk if you wanted to. You could go down here and mix in a Corey Connors at $7,600. and totally get away with it with your lineup construction. In fact, if you wanted to go Connor Straka as two relatively popular cheap options, as long as your last two spots were sub 5% owned, I'd be fine with this even in the lottery kind of GPPs. So this should give you an idea of where that second man in really dictates your exposure. I think up top, I mean, the ownership's pretty spread out to begin with. I mean, your lowest owned option that is 9,500 and above is Brooks Koepka, and he's like 14%. Morikawa, I've got it like 16, 17% ownership. So even your quote unquote pivots up top are still getting ownership. I don't think that's something that you have to avoid in your lineups. The area that's going to get dicey with ownership is that second man in, like I said. So in cash, I'll take all AM players. I mentioned that Scotty Scheffler would probably be the guy I'm building around, and that would definitely be the case out there in a 50-50, a head-to-head, whatever the case may be for cash. Scotty Scheffler is just the best player in the world, and $13,000 is probably even too cheap for him out there for a showdown contest. So I don't have much else to say for cash because I don't play it that often. But let's go over any last second questions. Where are we at? Do I think JT will fall apart tomorrow? It's possible. He didn't last weekend on Sunday, though, right? Saturday had like his worst round of the weekend at the Memorial. Sunday went out there, had one of the best rounds of the day. So JT isn't the sort of player to go out there and bitch quit. So I'm not as worried about it with him. How do I put either of them? I don't know who you're talking about, Alex. So sorry about that. You think Bez and Straka will be popular for round 2 showdown? I think that Straka will because he's even par, Bez because he's +2, not so much. So some of that comes down to their current score. I do think that Bez is going to be higher owned than he otherwise would have been, right? If he was like a slappy that shot +2, but he'll be lower owned than Straka. You'll be shocked when I see the current outrights. Okay, that excites me actually because I don't have a bunch of stuff in. Okay, you're saying McIlroy or Bryson. Yeah, I'd play both of them, honestly, Alex. I think they're both in play. I don't have a problem taking the chalk up top because you have other spots to get different. And those sort of players at a major championship kind of test are by far the best players in the field. So I'd be mixing them in regardless of the ownership and then making that stand elsewhere. Because those 8, 9K options, they're inferior talent-wise. Sure, they're cheaper. They're easier to play in lineups, but they're not the same kind of talent level as you have in that 10K range. So if anybody's worthy of getting played in bulk, in my opinion, it's the elite tier players. The guys that are the best players in the field, like a Scotty Scheffler, Rory, Bryson, would all fit that description. I wouldn't worry about it there, Alex. At least that's my style when building lineups. I'll take that chalk up top and differentiate elsewhere. That is my strategy for a majority of big field GPPs. You're like in Malnati. I think that's well within reason. Xander, Rory, Bryson, and Brooks are at 71.5. What do I think? I'm going to have to do some more research on that before I give you an answer. We're going to have to look at some sportsbook lines, Dotson. We're also going to have to take a look at pin locations. So I don't have a take for you quite yet. But that's all I've got for the DFS side, though. So if you guys were just here for fantasy, if you're just here for Draftkings Showdown, go ahead, smash like button as you head out of here. And, of course, stop on by for our round 3 and 4 streams. But we are not done with the action tonight. Now we're going to talk through our stuff over there on Underdog and Prize Picks. Which was great out there from round 1. We profited on both sites. And now we have the actual data to look with. The stuff you're using for round 1 was data from 2014. They ripped up the greens. We have a completely different agronomy this year. We also have a little bit of a different situation with the weather than what we had in 2014. So it was good to get a little reset on the stat averages to go out there and get a feel for what the field actually did. So we can use that out there for our round 2 exposure. So round 1 went pretty well. We did pretty solid with our course read this week. But now that we have this data, I'm really looking forward to round 2 because if anything, we should improve on what we did for Thursday. So let me get a sip of this. Let me see if there was anything to touch on in chat. If not, we're going to find some props to enter. Cut, by the way, I think it'll be +5 if I had to guess. +4 or +5, I would side towards +5. We're going to look at those after props, by the way, Thomas. Do I think Eamon Burns will make the cut? They're close enough. Do I think they will? Who knows? I don't got the magic ball on that. I will say, though, that they're close enough to the cut line that a +1 score likely gets in for them. So definitely possible. All right, let's go through these stat averages. So scoring average was a little bit over 3 over par, 73.26. Birdie average was super low. It was only 1.99 per round. More on this in a second. Bogey average, 4.69 per round, was very similar to what we had in 2014. Fairway average was also very comparable to 2014, and the green and regulation average was 9.62 per round. It's worth noting that I think that these numbers for greens and fairways are probably just going to go down as the week goes on. Course is going to get firmer and faster as long as they don't get any sort of rain in the area. These are going to get harder to hit each day and as this tournament progresses. So the fairway average tomorrow might be closer to like 9.25. Your green average is probably going to be sub 9.5 per round. We'll have to see exactly how much it changes from day to day. But this birdie average, I want to circle back on. We're going to have to see if I'm right about this. But I think that there's a very, very good chance that they move up one of the tee boxes on those par fours, whether it's 3, I forget what holes it is over there on the backside. There's actually 2 holes that they can move up and make drivable. Maybe it's 7. I don't know. There are 3 holes of this course for sure that they can move up and make drivable. If they do that, this birdie average is going to go up at least like 0.25. So if on these prop sites, if we can get some players at like 2.5 birdies for some overs, I'm going to like that, especially if we can find some elite tier birdie makers. So I haven't looked at the Prize Picks or the Underdog board yet. I have no idea what we're going to see for some value, but I do think that there's a good chance that they make one of the par fours more scoreable. And the main thing that's going to impact, I think a bogey average might go marginally down. These fairway green averages will probably, won't change much. If anything, I think they're going to go down in both cases. The big impact is going to be here with birdies or better. So let's see if they posted a tee sheet. I'm not sure if they did that yet. Doesn't look like they have quite yet. They waited until the round started to go out there and post it. So that wasn't that helpful out there from round 1. But let's see what we have on these prop sites. So Underdog seems to have their full board posted. It looks kind of similar to their round 1 stuff, maybe slightly higher when it comes to the strokes. I would say the birdie lines look even lower than what we had for the first day. So they have some guys here at 2.5 birdies. This was the site that we took a lot of fades on because they had guys at 3.5 birdies. Even your elite tier players like Colin, they have it 3 birdies now. So that's interesting. You have a bunch of 2.5s. Let's see, Cantlay's at 3. Is DJ at 2.5? Yeah, he's a 2.5er that they have posted. Let me see what they have on Prize Picks. So Prize Picks didn't have anything posted before we went live here. Their strokes lines are actually even higher than what we have over here in Underdog. So Scotty, for example, I know that he was at 69.5 over there on Underdog. A few of these other guys are also 0.5 higher than what they had on the other sites, which is interesting. I do think it's going to get more difficult. So Prize Picks is normally the sharper site, and it does look like they have these a little bit tighter than the other website. So birdies are better. Actually look pretty similar across the 2 websites. A lot of the 2.5s are also at 2.5 over there in Underdog. They do have a few guys at 2 and 1.5, but it's like your amateurs down there at the bottom end of the board. Max Homa being at 2.5 birdies does seem a little bit intriguing, but let's see what we have for these other categories. So they finally posted greens, and they have these a lot higher than I was expecting. And then fairways, they also posted, and that actually looks exactly where I kind of expected them to be. Another thing we're going to do before kind of figuring out what we're going to do is I want to look through some of the sportsbook lines. So just to kind of get a feel of where they're pricing the board. So 72.5 juiced under for a Troll Hand. I think that's a good data point to know. Scotty Scheffler's at 69.5 and juiced over. So they're expecting him to shoot around even par is what that's implying. Xander Schauffele, they have it about a 71 projection. Bryson is even money at 71.5. Let's see. Somebody like Straka, so like a mid-tier player, is at 72.5, and he's juiced just a little bit under. So they're expecting him to shoot around like 2 over par, which I think makes quite a bit of sense out there for your projections. Keegan Bradley's at even money at 72.5, so is slightly worse with the projection, likely because of his round 1 form. Burns, slightly juiced under a 72.5 line. Again, I know this might be a little bit boring if you're watching this and you just like want picks or whatever, but I'm not the type of person just to go out there and give you random plays, right? I'm trying to figure out the best stuff to enter, and I am incredibly thorough with what I do. Maybe a little bit too thorough for some people, but hey, it's my exposure, my money I'm putting into it, so I'm gonna take my time and make sure I actually like what I'm entering. So based on what I'm seeing here, the pricing is not all that far off than what we had for round 1. And if anything, I do think the course is going to get marginally more difficult outside of them potentially moving up one of the par 4s.
So my first instinct is to potentially fade some greens, potentially take some overs on birdies if we're going to go that direction to try and juice up some payouts. The other aspect would be to take some overs on bogeys. So if we're taking a look at the bogey lines, they have a lot of guys at 4.5 bogeys, which is way too high in my opinion, actually. So these guys that are at 4.5 bogeys, I'd consider for taking for unders. I thought they were going to have these guys at like 3.5 bogeys, and they don't. They have them at like 4.5 for a projection. And sure, the field average was what, 4.69 per round, but you have a bunch of amateurs in the field. You have a bunch of guys that shot like plus 10, plus 12 that inflate this average like crazy. Your average PGA Tour player, even like your slappy PGA Tour players, are probably making like 4.25 per round, maybe like 4 bogeys per round. So to have all these guys at 4.5, especially if you can find some like AMT times, I'm not against fading that, which I know it's a difficult course. I do think it might get slightly more difficult, but there could be a little bit of an over adjustment that was made here. So for example, Brian Harman is one of the best bogey avoiders on the PGA Tour, and he's at 4.5 bogeys. Now, I'm not certain we're actually going to take this prop for our exposure, but this is something that like stands out just like from the surface level here. Now, Caesars does have bogey lines that we can compare to. In fact, does Prize Picks have? No, Prize Picks doesn't have them posted yet. So we'll go over here to Caesars and see what they have. I'm guessing that some of these would be values for the under. So like, look at this. Look at this top of the board, right? The guy that we wanted to look for, Brian Harman's minus 155 under. Now, again, it's not like this course is easy, but the average was about this number. And Brian Harman is an elite tier bogey avoider. Jordan Spieth's at 4.5 and he's juiced under, for example. I don't know if we're going to get exposure here just because I do get worried about the conditions just being so tough that some guys just roll over and end up making those 5-6 birdies on bogeys or worse, I should say. But a Brian Harman is a grinder, right? He's won an Open Championship in some real difficult conditions. I'm going to leave him in the shopping cart for right now. So that's potentially an angle that we can take over here in Underdog. And then the other aspect of it is that their strokes lines like don't add up. So we might be able to find a fade for bogeys or a fade for strokes to kind of offset this and get a better payout. So let's see what we can do. Who were some of the guys that were juiced like minus 140, minus 150? So Rose was one, and he's minus 140. What is his line on Underdog? Where are we at? So he's at 73, so he was bumped. Okay, so maybe that's not the best prop. Let's see. His greens line is at 8.5 per round. What are we doing? I mean, I'm not going to take it because Justin Rose is an absolute bum, but maybe there's some overs on greens that we can take. Let's see. They've got 11 for Scotty. What is he on Prize Picks? He's at 12.5. Oh my goodness. These boards are all over the place, guys. Like Prize Picks has the strokes lines higher, right? Like so they're expecting it to play harder tomorrow, but their greens lines are higher than what they have in Underdog. So it just makes no sense, right? The site with the harder projections, Prize Picks, right? You'd expect to have lower greens, lower fairway lines, but it's the exact opposite. And vice versa, right? With the other stats. Oh God, that means it's confusing when that happens. Or it's like, why the hell would they do that? It makes no sense out there with projections. What it does mean though is that there's some sort of value out there with your exposure as well. So what I want to check here with good old Scotty is how many greens he hit today. So let me bring up the PGA website real quick. He didn't have a great round. I'm assuming he still hit like 9-10 greens. Because if he did, this is an absolute smash spot. Like I agree with the Prize Picks projections a little bit more. And let's see what Scotty did. So Scotty Scheffler shot +1, not his best stuff. Oh, it's not posted on the PGA site. Let's find it over here on the leaderboard then. So stats. He hit 12 today. And he shot +1. And we're going to post him at 10. I hate betting on players when we're at such a difficult golf course, but these props make no sense. It's like Underdog thinks it's going to go from hard to +5 over par in one day. Before the cut line happens, guys, they're not going to make it play +4, +5. That might happen on Saturday, Sunday. We might literally get a day where it plays impossible out there towards the weekend. They can't do it when there's 156 golfers on the golf course. They literally won't finish play out there by the time it gets to dusk, we'll all bitch about the fact that they didn't finish the play before the end of sundown and stuff. So they're just not going to do that. So I do think that conditions might get slightly harder. And by slightly harder, I think, maybe instead of 3.2 over par, it's like 3.5 or like 3.6 over par. I think that would make some sense. But the way that they have this price in Underdog for like these weird categories like bogeys and then greens is like they think it's going to be like +5 over par. It makes no sense. Scotty Scheffler shot over par today and hit 12 greens. Brian Harman, for example, I honestly don't even know how he played. I know he played poorly. I know that much. I faded him and he went under his line, so that went pretty solid. Well, let's see where he's at. How many bogeys did he even make today without his best stuff? And actually, am I giving him crap? Did he play better than I expect? So he actually only shot +1, and he made 3 bogeys today, right? So he shot +1, which was actually a little bit better than your field average. It made 3 bogeys. Now gets the morning tee time, is already an elite bogey avoider. And just to give you guys that perspective for that prop, I already entered it, so I like it, right? I'm just trying to give you guys some of the perspective here now. I'll show you guys where he ranks on bogey avoidance, which this year actually hasn't even been like elite tier for him, but you can see he's still number 55 on the PGA Tour. So well better than your average. If we go back to previous seasons, you'll see why I call him an elite tier bogey avoider. Last season was number 2 in the PGA Tour. Year before that was number 26. Year before that was number 27 on tour, and he was not an elite tier player in any season but last season, where he was number 2 on tour. So definitely a guy I'll take for the under at 4.5. And the sportsbook odds on Caesars would back that up as well, of course. So that's a decent slip over there in Underdog. We'll do that for the slip for the stream. Now let's go over here in Prize Picks and find something. So on the Prize Picks side, they have these strokes lines a little bit higher, which makes me think we might be able to find some unders like I did today. I took some unders today on strokes, which worked out over here on Prize Picks. I did have later exposure on Prize Picks just because I thought their board was a little bit better, which will probably be the case once again. Just based on pricing, just based on how easy it was to find a slip over here on Underdog, that's probably where my majority of my exposure is going to be again. But let's see what we can do here. So the prop I was looking at first off the bat was this Homa prop, and I want to do a little bit of line shopping. So just like they have bogey lines over here, they have birdie lines posted over here on Caesars. They should also have them on like DraftKings too. So we'll see if they have them there. But on Caesars, let's see if they have a Max Homa prop. So they do. He's at 2.5 and he's juiced under. So, hey, maybe it's not the best prop to get to. But let's see what they have him at on the other sites before I condemn them too much. So if we refresh this, they may have birdie or better props posted. They may not. But let's double check. See, whole scores, yeah, not posted quite yet. And then on DraftKings, have we had them posted? Not quite yet. So the only site we can compare to, as of right now, that'll probably change at some point here tonight, is Max Homa, and he's -130 under. So maybe we stick away from that. But I would change my tune on this 100% if we knew that the tee box was going to be moved up, which is why it's kind of disappointing we don't have this pin sheet. Because if we could look at the holes where it's drivable and take a look at the pin, we might be able to figure out if they're going to make it drivable, especially if it's like a center pin location. That would be a sign of them moving up the tee box, but we don't have those to look at quite yet. So, okay, let's maybe avoid the birdie or better props is what I'm hinting at there. And if they do move up one of those drivable par 4s, what I would do, by the way, and just have this game plan for tomorrow morning, guys, is hammer overs on birdies. Just find your elite tier putters, your elite tier players in general, and take them over at 2.5. Because what's going to happen, right? Birdie average today was about 2 per round. They move up one of the tee boxes on one of the drivable par 4s. Field average is going to be like 2.25 to 2.5 per round. It's going to go up rather significantly. Last year when they moved up the tee boxes, you had holes that played like half a stroke to 0.6 strokes under par back in 2014 at this golf course. So that's going to have a big effect on the dynamic birdie wise. So if the birdie average for the field would be like 2.5, which might happen if they move up one of those tees, your elite tier players are projecting for 3.5 per round. Because what you have to remember about rounds 1 and 2 is you've got amateurs, you've got a lot of guys out of form that are shooting +10, +12 that are heavily skewing these averages. So whether it's the averages for the field, whether it's the averages out there for specific players, it gets drastically moved. So you can take a look at the birdie, bogey average. All of that is inflated. Your greens, your fairway average, all of that is going to change drastically for rounds 3 and 4, which is why if they move up the tee box, these 2.5s would just be crazy value, because the birdie average for them would be like 3.5 per round. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on before we do some prize pick stuff. Tom Kim at 2.5 birds with the AM tee time. I'd rather take Homa as an AM guy, but I kind of like what you're thinking there. Same thing with Fleetwood. I like the way you're thinking. 13 wouldn't be till the weekend. That makes sense. They can move up 3 though, Blake. So there's actually multiple that they can move up. So we'll have to see. If they don't, I think the birdie lines are pretty fair. Kep says, sorry to be late. All good. Better late than never, my man. And he said, who's doing better than they did today? So in terms of a bounce back, I talked up a few, but I think Hideki is one of my top options. Jordan Spieth would be one because he was so good from tee to green today. And then Keegan Bradley. So there's 3 options for you. Hopefully that helps. You're looking at Keegan for under 10 greens. Yeah, or not Keegan. I don't know what I'm thinking. I was thinking about Keegan Bradley for some reason, I guess. But yeah, Henley under 10 greens. I like the way you're thinking. Yeah, average was like 9.6. I'd say the average for your elite tier players is probably closer to like 10, 10.5. But Russell Henley's a bum. So I get that. Hope you're doing great, Luke. I am. Hopefully that is the same thing with you, Derek. And you just got home from working at the course. You need some Ryan Fox to do well. Best of luck out there tomorrow, my man. And yeah, working on the course can be hard work. So I empathize with you. I have a lot of buddies that do that either working as club pros, working up to be club pros at golf courses, and they grind, that's for sure. But it's a lot of fun, obviously, working on a course too. A lot of benefits with getting to play golf as well. What do I think the cut will be? Yeah, +4, +5 is what I have it at. I'm thinking it might be like +5 because of conditions, but that's just me. Scotty under 12 greens. Not under. I'm going over 12 greens. I don't know what you're saying, boss man. He's not at 12. He's at 11, right? He's at, unless they bumped it while we were on here. I don't know about that. I wouldn't be fading Scotty Scheffler. He hit 12 today and shot +1. He's not shooting +1 tomorrow. He's probably shooting like -3, -4. I would not count on that one. That's at least my. You can do whatever the hell you want, right? Just because I don't like it doesn't mean you don't have to enter that. But I wouldn't do that. That's for sure. Haven't been able to catch the live for a while. Let's get it. Love to have you in here for once in the live stream, right? I know we got a lot of people that watch on replay. Still love you guys as well, but definitely like having you guys in the live chat. Just hits a little bit different, right? So cheers to you. Hoping you're having a fantastic Thursday. Speed's down at 9 greens and hit 15 today. He hit 15 greens today? What the fuck? That's news to me. I know he played well. I didn't know he hit 15 greens. That's actually nuts. 9 greens is not bad. And he's at 9 on Underdog. Whoa. That's crazy. Now, the issue for Spieth, man, is he's not been good with the irons this year. I mean, he's been dog shit with the irons this year. Let's just be honest about it. Let's be frank about it. He's not been good when it comes to hitting irons. So I'm probably not going to play this myself, but I understand why you'd want to play it. The average was higher than 9 per round. And again, that's heavily inflated by the really shitty players in the field. So I think there's value there, but I'm not going to play it just because of his the unknown there with the wrist. Bryson under 71.5 on Prize Picks. What's his line on books? I'll give you an answer there. So he's even money. I don't think it's the worst play. Think Tiger can get in the cut. He can. He's probably going to have to shoot like even par, maybe like 1 over par to make the cut. It's possible, but he's going to have a clean round. Anyone have the odds on Hideki strokes? I'll bring them up for you. So Hideki goes off early, and I'm assuming they have his strokes line posted, but they might not. Sometimes they don't post all the players that you'd expect them to. So yeah, they don't have a Hideki Matsuyama line, at least on DraftKings. Let me see if they have them on Caesars. They may have them on this site. Come on now. See, Hideki Matsuyama, anything? Nope, nothing to compare to. So unfortunately, the books don't have anything posted, or else I'd hook you up with those odds. You would slam the over on greens or Scotty. You were kidding? Yeah, I was going to say, if you take the under on Scotty stuff, you're bolder than I am, right? Heck, even for round 1, I didn't fade Scotty Scheffler today. I faded almost everyone. And that's why we had the day that we had, right? Course played pretty difficult, like we expected. I would not fade Scotty. I didn't fade him. I just couldn't do it. You're glad you're doing well. Do I have any good $1 million lineups? I'm not in the Millie Maker this week, so I didn't play in the big Millie Maker. I do have some really good lineups, though, Derek, out there in the $5 GPP. So I did a $5 GPP, did some single entries this week, about $500 in single entries, and chose to do that instead of the big lottery sort of contest. So we already have our underdog exposure in. Let's try and do something on Prize Picks. So that was enough catching up on chat. If you have any questions, any props that you want to point out, just let me know. I know somebody mentioned this Bryson one. If anything, I think I'd rather take his birdies, and the fact that he's at 3 just makes him a stay away spot for me. So I think after the good round 1, I wouldn't be against taking this under for Bryson DeChambeau, but I'm just not going to do it myself. And some of that's just feel, right? Like somebody like Bryson, I love him as a player and everything like that, but he's a loose cannon. He's very inconsistent. He doesn't always go out there and back up his low rounds with another one. So that's why I'm choosing to avoid that myself. You got to use a little bit of, I don't know the right word for it. Like, yeah, I don't know the word for it, but you got to have a little bit of feel when it comes to playing props. You've got to kind of have perspective with it. Sometimes, like if someone's going out there and like makes 4 birdies in a row for 3 straight rounds, it does not guarantee that they're going to do it the 4th straight day. In fact, if they're slapdick, that likely means that they're going to come back down to earth. So I guess that's what I meant by that. So let's look at the Hovland line. So I was looking at this, and low key, Hovland's, obviously played horribly today. He did not have anywhere remotely close to his best stuff. But 72.5 feels a little bit disrespectful. So let me see what he's at on one of these sites. So they don't have him on Caesars. He wasn't on Draftkings for sportsbook odds. What is he on Underdog, I guess? He's at 72 strokes, which is probably a little bit more fair than what they had him on Prize Picks. I wouldn't even be against this for Victor Hovland. See, 72. You got a bunch of like PM guys that stay away from. You got Hideki. I know somebody mentioned this one before. We don't have the odds to compare to, but these sort of players at 72.5, I guess that's why somebody was asking about it before. I think I agree with you. If you were thinking about playing this. So Cam Young's at 72.5. I'm just trying to eye the bottom end of this board real quick. Oh, it's not like I think this course is going to play easy, guys. So like, don't take me taking these unders or the slip that we took an underdog as me saying that. It's just that at a certain point, there's an over adjustment that's been made on players. I think that Hideki here is probably the more realistic out of these 2 players. Hideki wasn't nearly as broken as somebody like Hovland was today, but Hovland is a better player than Hideki out there. At least when he's playing his best golf, is a much better golfer than what we have with Hideki. So what is Hideki over here? He's probably at 72, I'd imagine. Yeah, so 72 strokes. What have we got for birdies are better on Hovland? Is he at 3 or is he at 2.5? So he's at 3 birdies are better. Yeah, we're going to take this. So this is going to be the slip over there on the Prize Picks side. So still respect the golf course, right? Know that if these are going to go under 72.5 strokes, they're going to be shooting +2 or better, right? So there's quite a bit of leeway out there in shooting a +2 round. Both of them are AMT times, so I think you're getting the slightly better conditions. And for PMT times, guys, I would not be taking unders over there on strokes. I would not be taking unders, or should say overs, over there on birdies, because those conditions are the ones that are going to get brutal, right? When it's getting up to like 90 degrees and going to bake out, those PM players are going to struggle mightily out there, right? That's why we're taking the AM guys out there in Showdown. If you're going to take supportive stance plays, my recommendation out there for your stuff out there in props is make sure you're doing it on AM players. What I want to do now is bring up pick 6. We'll do this one real quickly, and then we're hopping on out of here. We're already overtime based on what I wanted to do. I've got some stuff to do tonight, actually. So let's do this rather quickly here. So birdies are better. Just curious where they have the board. So higher than the other sites, which is kind of typical of pick 6. They're usually a little bit too optimistic when it comes to their projections. Strokes, let's see, also looks maybe a little bit too optimistic compared to some of the other sites out there. Let's look at bogeys or worse, 3.5 for some of those players. And then pars, I'm not even looking at. So the main category that we can probably find some fades here for, I think strokes would make quite a bit of sense. And then maybe some unders on some birdies props. So just to do some line shopping, Don't hate the idea of fading a Sam Burns, especially because he's going to be a PMT time. Is going to be playing when the greens are going to get especially crusty. And if we're looking for other players that we know that are going off later, we could take Burns there. In terms of unders on birdies are better. PMT times would be a Koepka, would also be a Patrick Cantlay. But I would probably avoid those players because they're some of the higher quality players in the field. If you're looking for guys at 2.5 to fade that are PMT times, let's see who we can work with. And I'm trying to look for more of the scrubs towards the bottom end of this board. And there's actually not a lot of scrubs. So actually, this board isn't nearly as mispriced as what I thought at first, I guess. There's still spots of value, don't get me wrong, but it's not maybe as obvious value as what I first thought when I brought up this tab. So let's take the over on Sam Burns. Honestly, I don't know if I like that much more on the board here. Like, there's spots that I'd sure lean in one direction or the other, but on pick 6, normally it's a lot easier to find these props. So let's take him. I'm not against that for Cantlay, especially because he's PM. Wait, let me make sure I'm right on that. Yeah, he's PMT time, right? Yeah, he's a PM wave guy. So we could potentially take that at 2.5. Is Benny Ann PM? Let me double check. Yeah, Benny Ann's also a PM wave tee time. So maybe you take his under at 2.5 birdies. These would be the kind of props that I'd be looking for over here on the pick 6 side. Let's see who else would fit that description. Let me see. What is Ryan Fox? One second here. Yeah, so Ryan Fox is a PM wave tee time too. So maybe you could take him for an under on birdies. That's probably what I'd leave it at. So this pick 6 board isn't nearly as much value as what I normally see, but I don't think that everyone's going to be entering the same kind of slips. The added benefit of having a better priced board is that you're going to get a better payout if you go out there and actually hit on your slip, as opposed to the board that is just completely mispriced, where it's like 2-3 strokes off and everyone's just hammering one direction. If that happens and the hit rate in your pool is like 90%, you're going to end up hardly even making money if you go out there and hit a slip on this pick 6 slate. So I guess what I like about the better pricing is that aspect. Going out there, having a higher potential for payout, but these are the kind of props that I take over there. Let's catch up on any last second questions. And if we don't have any, we're hopping on out of here. So where we at? Noren 2.5 birdies. I would wait on the tee box. If you see that they move up one of the par 4s, then potentially mix that in. Same thing with DJ at 2.5 birdies. I would wait for that. The sportsbook lines, at least at this stage, are actually juiced towards the under for a lot of those. You took Scotty under 3.5 birdies. I think that you are a brave human being. And frankly, I would not do that. If you were asking me my take on that, I'd be giving you the opposite play. Hovland versus Decky is an interesting debate as who is the better golfer. Yeah, it depends on your constraints, right, Sam? If you're talking about long-term form, it's clearly Victor Hovland, right? If you're talking about over the last month, maybe month and a half, then you could definitely say Hideki Matsuyama, especially if you're looking at the recent form metrics. So a lot of that is how you frame the question. What do I think the scoring average will be? Plus 3.5. And I think there's potential that it could get to plus 4, but plus 3.5. Yeah, let's look at the outrights. Thank you for reminding me, by the way. So we have them over here on Draftkings. So I'm just going to take a look at these because it'll be a little bit quicker than bringing up Hard Rock Bet. But let's look at it. So outright board has plus 240 for Rory, plus 600 for Scotty. I wouldn't be against betting Scotty Scheffler at plus 600. I know that sounds crazy because he's plus 1 at this stage, but your winner of this event is probably going to be -3, -4 by the end of the week. So Scotty Scheffler, I'm not completely against betting. Brooks is still 22-1. So I kind of like to see that for my outright bet that I took at that same number. Yeah, if I was going to do anything right now, man, I might take Scotty at plus 600. I hate to say it. I think that he's still going to win this U.S. Open, right? Even after what he did in round 1. And plus 600 is, I don't want to say it's like great value, but it's approaching the kind of value that I actually play. Pavon under 11 fairways, he might be onto something there. He's not always the most accurate driver. So I'm assuming that's on Prize Picks that you saw that on. So yeah, he's at 11. Let me double check his averages from the season. So if we go to off the tee, we bring up driving accuracy percentage, and we find Pavon on this big old list. So he's number 18 on tour, actually. I take that back. I don't know. It's still a good under, I would say, because the average was like 9.7 per round, but he's not as inaccurate as what I was hoping for. Any 2-ball or 3-ball matchups, I'll probably post a few for my Patreon page, but don't have the time for it right now, Zach. So unfortunately, I do have something I have to get to tonight, but otherwise, most live streams, I would definitely be willing to go through that. So if you're in the Patreon, hit me up on the Discord and I'll try and do that a little bit later this evening. But I apologize for that. Again, normally I'd be able to do that for you, but I've got something I got to attend to. So that's all I've got here for tonight, guys. Best of luck out there for your round 2 exposure, whether it's for DFS, props, outrights, you guys name it. Go out there and crush it for Friday and make your boy proud over here. So hopefully you guys can report back out there for the Saturday live stream with some wins regardless of the slate that you're entering, and we can go out there and have ourselves a weekend. So best of luck. Like I said before, smash like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't so you can catch all the content to come. It'll be round 3 and 4 live streams like I just mentioned, and of course the content for the rest of the golf schedule. I'm looking forward to it. Should be an absolutely epic weekend. Saturday, Sunday are going to be must-watch TV when it comes to the scoring conditions. And while I think tomorrow it's not going to change all that much, trust me, that carnage is going to come over the weekend. So if you're somebody that likes seeing hard scoring conditions, likes seeing the players tested out there in pretty much every single shots gained category, well, that's what you're going to get at this major. So should be a lot of fun. Like I said, a lot of action to come, and best of luck out there for tomorrow.